Chapter 151. In the ward filled with the smell of disinfectant, silence filled the air. Mugging was wearing a hospital gown and lying on the bed. Her white arm was exposed outside the quilt, and there was an IV drip on it. This made the usually proud and confident Mugging show a sense of weakness that outsiders couldn't see. However, those who observed carefully would be able to see it. Although Mugging, who was lying on the bed, exuded a weak aura, her face was rosy. It was a color that represented health. Mugging, who had completed the kidney transplant, woke up less than a day ago. Unfortunately, in less than a day, Mugging, who had regained consciousness, also received a terrifying piece of news that left him speechless and shuddering. The monolith collapsed. Mugging's rosy face was slightly dignified, and she bit her lips. Something like this actually happened. Miss Mugging, what should we do now? On the side, Rentaro sighed with a sad face. Just now, I also received an invitation to form an auxiliary force. Auxiliary force. Mugging also sighed. Has it already reached this point? As long as one had taken the police license exam, they would have heard of the term support system in the lectures for the police license exam. It was a policy that allowed the police to form their own teams to join the self-defense forces when the government took emergency measures. Therefore, the so-called auxiliary system referred to the police team system under the self-defense forces. Once this system was launched, the police could not only form their own teams, but also form their own auxiliary force. They would become the same as the self-defense forces, but also independent of the self-defense forces. There would also be a legion commander in addition to the captain of the auxiliary force, who would command all the police teams and conduct battle. Simply put, all the police would first find their own teammates, form a team, and then all of them would gather together under the command of a legion commander. Now, the Tokyo area was facing an unprecedented crisis, so it was inevitable that the Tentong Civilian Police Company would receive an invitation to form an auxiliary force. In other words, Rentaro, who received this invitation, had to find his own teammates as the captain of the auxiliary force and form a team. It's developed to the point where it's a headache. Mugging was speechless, then she looked at Noah, who had been silent the whole time, and asked in confusion. What's wrong? Noah raised his eyes slightly and looked at Mugging. After a while, he shook his head. I don't know why, but I have a bad feeling about this. Is it just a bad premonition? I thought that even you felt a sense of crisis. Ryutaru smiled bitterly. It's normal to have an ominous premonition. After all, the entire Tokyo region is facing a great crisis. No. That's not true. Noah kept these words in his heart and did not say them out loud. If only the entire Tokyo region was in danger, Noah would never have such an ominous premonition. This was because Noah did not have the slightest good impression of Tokyo. Whether it would be destroyed or not, Noah didn't care at all. Noah only needed to ensure that the people he cared about could survive. That was enough. Therefore, Noah knew that the ominous premonition in his heart was definitely not because the Tokyo region was facing a great crisis, but because the people he cared about were facing a crisis. It was this inexplicable ominous premonition that prevented Noah from giving a clear response to Seiko, who had high hopes for Bullet. Ignoring Seiko's anxiety, he subconsciously gave a perfunctory response. Noah would never doubt his own intuition. Therefore, after leaving Seiko and coming to the hospital, Noah had been worried about this matter. He did not care about the Tokyo region's crisis that everyone was concerned about. No matter what, we have to form an auxiliary force to protect the entire Tokyo region. Otherwise, everyone will die. Although Mugino was very concerned about Noah's strange behavior, he saw that Noah was silent, so he didn't ask anything. Instead, he turned to Rentaro and said, Rino-kun, have you thought about who you want to team up with? Ryutaru's expression suddenly became awkward. Needless to say, Ryutaru definitely had not thought about who he wanted to team up with. In fact, Ryuteru's road to team up was quite bumpy. Ryuteru was already relatively young, only 16 years old this year, 2 years short of the minimum age limit for police officers. For the rest of the police officers who were mostly thugs who would look up to Ryuteru. Moreover, Ryuteru's IP ranking was only 9,900. This ranking was very impressive in the eyes of the police officers who were not very capable, but the truly powerful police officers would only look down on such a ranking. In other words, not only would it be difficult for Ryuteru to find a teammate, but even if he did find one, it would be impossible for him to find a teammate who was very powerful. Wah! At this moment, the entire hospital was in an uproar. What's going on? Mugging and Ryuteru were shocked, and even Noah was stunned. His heart inexplicably tightened. A thought flashed through his mind, and Noah immediately walked in front of the TV in the ward and turned it on. Beep! When the sound of the TV being turned on echoed in the ward, Noah, Mugging, and Ryuteru saw a piece of news that was specially marked as urgent. It was a news report that was accompanied by an image taken from a helicopter. The volume of the helicopter's propeller was particularly shocking. The reporter's voice also sounded very distant. However, the content of the reporter's words was clearly transmitted to everyone's ears. Unfortunately, Noah, Mugging, and Ryuteru were no longer paying attention to what the reporter was saying with a face full of excitement. This was because their attention was completely captured by the video on the TV. Through the magnification of the camera, a huge black fortress was displayed on the screen. Needless to say, anyone could guess that it was the monolith that guarded humanity's last paradise. However, in addition to the familiar pitch-black color of the monolith, in the video, there were also white spots everywhere. Seeing this, Noah, Mugging, and Ryuteru finally understood why there was such a commotion in the hospital. The monolith that was covered in white spots on the television could only be the monolith that had been injected with the nightmare corrosive liquid by the Judas of Aldebaran, causing it to enter a white and crumbling state. It seemed that the abnormality of the monolith, in number 32, had finally been discovered. Of course, it was unlikely that an ordinary person would know what it meant for the monolith to undergo such a change. Therefore, the reason for the commotion was probably the scene behind the monolith. A large group of black monsters. A large group of primitive animals of different sizes and shapes gathered behind the monolith, in number 32. They roared at the sky, and their scarlet eyes were filled with a murderous light that made people's hair stand on end. How could this be? Ryuteru muttered absent-mindedly. The whitening phenomenon of the monolith was not very intense. How could it be discovered so quickly? I'm afraid it was a coincidence. Mugging said hatefully. Humans are always paying attention to the monolith. After all, it's the biggest guarantee of survival in the apocalypse. There are so many people in the Tokyo area, so it's not strange at all for someone to pay attention to it and notice the abnormality. Noah nodded, he had the same idea. However, on the TV, the following words of the news writer made Noah's expression change. According to the latest news, there is a deep underground bunker in the Tokyo area, but it can only accommodate 30% of the population. The list of people is randomly selected by the computer and will only be announced on the day it is opened. Among these 30% people, there is also the cursed child. The ominous feeling in Noah's heart suddenly swelled to the highest level, and it made Noah finally understand why he had such a bad feeling. Not good. Without another word, Noya rushed out of the hospital window amidst Mugino and Rintaro's cries of alarm. Chapter 152. Drive them out. Drive them out. Drive out all of the cursed children. In a corner of District 39, which usually did not have many people gathering, there was a large group of people outside the personal area called Fairy Tale. Some of them were holding flags with bloody words written on them, while others were holding loudspeakers and shouting at the top of their lungs. Protest. Seriously, protest. We can't accept this. Shouts like this continued to resound in the crowd of at least 300 to 400 people, and some of them even took advantage of the chaos to shout out chilling words. Kill! Kill them all! Let these monsters go to hell! Inside Fairy Tale, a lot of people had already gathered behind the entrance. Some of them stood far away, watching the scene, and some of them stood on top of the wall to observe the scene. Xiaoshi, Hina, and Yanzhu were the three people on top of the wall to witness the scene. At this time, Yanzhu's usually cheerful little face was filled with fear, and she couldn't help but pull Hina's hand. Hey, when will the president come back? I don't know. Hina shook her head, and her eyes were filled with worry as she looked outside. Why did this happen? It's very simple. Standing in front of Yanzhu and Hina, Xiaoshi's face didn't have the slightest bit of fear, and he said extremely cruel words with an indifferent tone. They can't accept us taking away their precious chance of survival. Yes. This was the reason why Fairy Tale, which no one dared to blatantly spread rumors and cause trouble, was once again targeted by the plundered generations in the Tokyo area. The news that number 32 monolith was about to collapse had already spread to the point where everyone knew about it. At the same time, the news of the underground bunker that could save the lives of the Tokyo area's residents had also spread like wildfire, and now no one didn't know about it. Needless to say, the opportunity to enter the underground bunker that could accommodate 30% of the residents was very precious. No one would be generous enough to give up such an opportunity and expose themselves to absolute danger. Therefore, almost every resident of the Tokyo area prayed to the gods and Buddhas to bless them so that they could be chosen to enter the underground bunker and ensure their survival. However, when the news that the cursed children were also on the list of candidates spread, the residents of the Tokyo area finally couldn't continue to sit still. It was already a rare opportunity to save their lives, but now, a group of cursed children, who could turn into monsters at any time, and whose bodies had the blood of animals flowing in them. How could the more than 90% of the residents in the entire Tokyo area who rejected cursed children tolerate this? Therefore, because of the confusion and panic in their hearts about the future had nowhere to vent, trying to increase their chances of being selected as much as possible, unable to accept the monsters sharing the survival quota, and so on, the people in Tokyo finally showed their ugly side. The reason was also very simple. It was to change the fact that the cursed child also had a quota to enter the underground bunker. Now, the people who still had some sense left had already gone to the holy residence to protest, trying to make the Holy Sun change this decision. The brainless residents who had lost their rationality had all gathered here with their heads burning. They spat at the fairy tale, the shelter of the cursed child, as if by doing so, they could replace the chosen, cursed child and enter the underground bunker. Therefore, the residents of the Tokyo area who were occupied by the idea of wanting to live triggered the first scene that led to the Tokyo area entering a state of chaos. Listening to the angry protests and curses from outside Fairy Tale, many people in Fairy Tale also expressed something with indignation. Is the president not back yet? Are we going to tolerate their impudence? Why don't we just go out and chase them away? No, that will give those insects who have lost their sense of reason to fight for their lives, and then cause a big riot. What are you afraid of? Aren't they just a group of ordinary people? We have a lot of police here, and who knows how many cursed children. Dealing with a group of ordinary people is easy. Yes, yes. That's right. Although most of the people in Fairy Tale were the cursed children, there were also many police officers, teachers, researchers, and other miscellaneous people. Even the oldest was only 10 years old, so the cursed children, who could be considered to be at the level of a child, seemed to be at a loss for what to do when the adults started making things difficult for them. They were also very afraid. However, other than the children, everyone else was angered by the adults. Seeing that the atmosphere was getting more and more tense, and getting worse and worse, the anger and ruthlessness in both sides were also rising by the second. Many children were already crying, making Xiaoshi, Yanzhu, and Hina a little anxious. Seeing that the children were scared to tears, the anger in the hearts of the adults in fairy tale was also successfully ignited. Go! Go out and teach them a lesson. Go! In an instant, many police officers took the lead and rushed out of fairy tale with angry faces. They're coming out. They're coming out. Go! Fight it out with them. Chase them out. The plundered generation, who had gathered outside fairy tale to cause trouble, also crazily raised all kinds of weapons in their hands, such as sticks, kitchen knives, baseball bats, and so on, in an attempt to turn the confusion of the future and the fear of not being able to survive into violence and venting it out. Bang! Just as the fairy tale people were about to rush out of the door, the plundered generations were about to go crazy, and the two sides were about to collide. A gunshot rang out, startling everyone present and causing them to raise their eyes and look over. On the wall of fairy tale, Xiaoshi, Yanzhu, and Hina also heard the gunshot and turned their gazes to the source of the sound, immediately revealing a joyful expression. President. The person who came was Noah, who had rushed over from the hospital. Raising the modified revolver with smoke coming out of the muzzle high above his head, Noah slowly raised his head. A pair of dark and deep eyes with a bone-chilling light swept over the brainless residents who were planning to rush into fairy tale aggressively. The next moment, a chilling voice echoed in the air. In 10 seconds, if anyone continues to stay here and cause trouble, I will exercise self-defense in the name of the owner of fairy tale and kill the troublemaker on the spot. After saying this, Noah lowered the hand holding the revolver, not giving anyone a chance to speak, and with a cold voice, he began the countdown. 10, 9, 8, 7, as the countdown began, a ferocious aura that made everyone's hair stand on end rose from Noah's body, causing the brainless residents to stiffen. The fear of death in the depths of their hearts suddenly erupted. Run! After someone shouted this, flags, sticks, horns, and other items with bloody words written on them were thrown to the ground in a series of palipala sounds. All the residents who had gathered to cause trouble also panicked and fled in all directions, scattering like birds and beasts. Oh, 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 oh. Inside fairy tale, regardless of whether it was the adults or the children, they all erupted in cheers as if they had won a victory. President, brother. Yanzhu and Hina both rushed out of fairy tale and threw themselves into Noah's arms. President. Xiaoshi also walked over, her face as cold as usual, had an unconcealable sense of relief. Hugging Yanzhu and Hina, Noah nodded at Xiaoshi, glanced at the brainless residents who were running away in a hurry, a haze flashing in his eyes. Chapter 153. In the central plaza of fairy tale, Noah, Xiaoshi, Yanzhu, Tina, and a few other people stood together. In front of Noah and his group, there was a pile of packages that either had a timer or were tightly wrapped in waxy yellow tape. There were at least 500 to 600 packages. Looking at the bags piled up in front of them, Noah, who was always good at controlling his emotions, Xiaoshi, who was indifferent, Tina, who had a sloppy personality, the innocent Yanzhu, and the rest of the people present all had ugly expressions on their faces. Not long after, around them, there were quite a few people who were carrying similar packages. With ugly and serious expressions, they piled the packages in front of Noah and gnashed their teeth in anger. President, we found another 20 or so. 20. Tina said in disbelief. Then with the ones on the ground, wouldn't there be a total of 754? Liar. Yanzhu cried out in fear. If that's the case, then once all of these things are lured away, fairy tale. Fairy tale, at that time, I'm afraid there won't be any fairy tale anymore. Xiaoshi spat out words of anger, which was rare of him. That's 754 bombs. That's right. Bombs. Piled up in front of Noah and his group were all bombs with extraordinary power. Moreover, these bombs were all dug up from various corners of fairy tale not long ago. It was just like what Xiaoshi said. Once all of these bombs were detonated, saying that fairy tale would no longer exist might be a bit of an exaggeration, but for the people of fairy tale, it would definitely be a disaster that could topple their existence. Bastards! They actually dared to do this. Standing behind Noah, the people of fairy tale cursed out angrily. Their eyes and faces were filled with anger that could not be extinguished. Even Xiaoshi, Yanzhu, and Tina were the same. Noah, who was standing in front of everyone, clenched his fists tightly. Anger, coldness, sharpness, and coldness flashed across his dark eyes. Everything that could be expected flashed across his eyes. There was never a lack of crazy people in this world. Now, the Tokyo area was facing a great possibility of direct extinction. Under such circumstances, the madness that was suppressed in people's hearts that was usually controlled by reason, along with the fear of death, was completely vented out. An opportunity to enter the underground bunker triggered the conflict between the Tokyo residents and the cursed children. However, that was nothing. The truly terrifying people were those who were completely crazy. In order to survive, people who could do anything. For example, those who wanted to reduce the candidate list as much as possible in order to increase the chances of entering the underground bunker. Simply put, those who wanted to be able to enter the 30% range to kill people, increasing their chances of being selected by reducing the number of candidates. Another example was those who stole, robbed, gambled, and risked their lives in order to get a ticket out of the Tokyo area that was about to become a hopeless situation. It had only been half a day since the news of the collapse of Monolith 32 was known to the world in the form of news. However, in the recent period of time, the plane tickets that could leave the Tokyo area had already been sold out crazily. In order to get such a ticket, people had already fallen into a frenzy. Now, even if you were casually walking on the road, you could be directly knocked out by a stick and searched. And now, the bombs that were buried in every corner of fairy tale not long ago in front of Noah and the others were undoubtedly the masterpieces of the former. Noah had been aware of it for a long time. When he found out that the ominous premonition in his heart was that the plundered generation was about to target the cursed child because of the list of candidates to enter the underground bunker, Noah felt that in this conflict of life and death, the plundered generation would definitely not be as simple as in the past. Facts proved that Noah's intuition was right. The 754 bombs in front of him were the best evidence. In order to survive, the Tokyo residents who showed their ugly side finally made a move against the cursed child that they hated very much. Noah took a deep breath and suppressed the tumbling emotions in his heart. However, there was no longer any emotion in his eyes. Instead, he looked to the side with complete indifference. "Let me go. Do you know who I am?" The one who shouted such a sentence was a tall, thin man with sinister eyes like a snake. That was a person who was not unfamiliar to Noah. "I am the captain of the Holy Residence Guards." The man roared. "You dirty policemen dare to treat me like this. You're finished. You're finished." Impressively, it was Zhuo. At this time, Zhuo, who was roaring crazily, was tied up and thrown on the ground. Behind him, there were about 30 people, who were also tied up tightly, lying on the ground. They were shouting and yelling at the surroundings. However, around these lambs that had been reduced to prisoners waiting to be slaughtered, the members of Fairy Tale were all casting cold and furious gazes at them. This caused the prideful Bao Mengjue to be the first to be unable to take it, and he began to shout like a maniac. In front of everyone present, Noah walked step by step toward Zhuo. Zhuo's shout came to an abrupt end. Looking at Noah, whose face could not be seen, walking towards him step by step with his head lowered, a look of fear appeared in Zhuo's eyes. "You. What do you want to do?" Noah still had his head down and walked in the direction of Zhuo. This caused Sharon's fear to rise to the highest point. The memory of being taught a lesson by Noah in the past also surged into his mind, causing him to shout without caring about his image. Wait! Wait! Don't come over! Don't come over! Aw, 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 aw. Amidst the screams, a strong and powerful kick mercilessly landed on Sharon's chest. Bang! Poochie! Sharon spat out a mouthful of blood. His body flew out and heavily landed on the ground not far away. However, almost at the same time, the foot that had just kicked him ruthlessly once again stepped on the chest of Baowei. Bang! Ah! Shaoran let out a painful scream. Unfortunately, at the scene, no one showed any sympathy for Shaoran's experience. They were still cold. Speak! Forcefully stepping on Shaoran's chest, Noah coldly looked at him. Who ordered you to plant bombs in Fairy Tale? Among the 30% list that could enter the underground bunker, the cursed child could occupy at least 5% of it. In order to ensure that at least 5% of the slots would fall into their hands, many people didn't mind committing murder in Fairy Tale and killing all the cursed children to empty the slots. However, although Shaoran was fired, it was not difficult for him to get a plane ticket out of Tokyo. Therefore, among the people here, the group of former guards of the holy abode led by Shaoran definitely did not come for the quota. It was more likely that they were seeking revenge or were ordered by someone else. Otherwise, how could an ordinary person obtain a total of 754 bombs so easily? Ugh! Ah! Shaoran opened his mouth wide like a scream. He wanted to say something but was tortured to the point where he could not speak. Take all these people with you. Noah kicked Shaoran out again. Turning around, he did not care about Shaoran, whose life or death was unknown. As he walked in the direction of the door, he squeezed out this sentence. Let's go to the holy abode. Chapter 154. Outside the holy residence, a group of residents in the Tokyo area held up flags of opposition and protest, shouting loudly in the direction of the holy residence, making all the voices mix together, forming an unbearable noise. In addition to the residents of Tokyo who held up flags of opposition and protest outside the holy residence, in front of the gate of the holy residence, a group of reporters with microphones and staff with cameras also gathered together, asking very sharp questions. Lord, what do you think about the opinions of the residents of the Tokyo area? Will you cancel the decision to give the cursed son a place to enter the underground bunker? Isn't this the wish of the people? Or do you intend to ignore the wishes of the people? Has the list of people to enter the underground bunker already been decided by you? Please answer. Lord. Lord. Being questioned by a group of reporters, or even forced to answer, under the protection of the guards, standing in front of the gate of the holy residence, the Holy Son, who accepted this large-scale press conference, responded calmly with his usual holy face. I can understand everyone's feelings. I am also very sad that we can't protect all our citizens, but please believe in our strength. This is not necessarily despair. We will definitely think of a way to solve this crisis. In the past, with the incredible affinity and influence of the Holy Son, the residents of the Tokyo area would be relieved with just such a sentence. However, unlike in the past, this time, it was not just the problem of the Tokyo area that was about to face a major crisis, but the other problems involved by this problem were the real key. People have a dark side. In the past, people could only hide the dark side of their hearts and live a relatively peaceful life. However, once this peace is broken, darkness like this will also break out. Fear. Horror. Panic. Human beings who have been dominated by such emotions can no longer be described as rational. One by one, they are crazy, as if they have a deep hatred for the Holy Son, and they don't want to accept the explanation of the Holy Son at all. Therefore, before the reporters could continue to ask questions, the crowd began to clamor again. The Holy Son of Heaven seemed to have expected that this matter would not be resolved so easily. In addition to continuing to respond to the list of names and places to enter the underground bunker, he also began to encourage the residents to seek refuge in other areas. However, the number of planes was overwhelmingly insufficient. Therefore, the words of the Holy Son of Heaven did not ease the tension that enveloped the entire Tokyo area. Under such circumstances, the ugly side of human beings was completely revealed. Some people have already begun to criticize the Holy Son of Heaven for being incompetent, for not being able to protect the Tokyo region, for not being qualified to be the ruler of Tokyo, and so on. Some people angrily scolded the Holy Son for being muddle-headed. He did not use the rare life-saving opportunity on the people, but instead gave it to the cursed child. He simply did not care about the lives of the people. Some people even started to make personal attacks on the Elysian Son of Heaven's female identity, causing the scene to become chaotic. If this continues, the residents of the Tokyo area, who can't control their emotions, may directly turn into violent mobs. Moreover, once the violence of the thugs exceeded the level that the police and autonomous patrol could handle, then the entire Tokyo area could develop into a state of anarchy and chaos. Even without the attack of the primitive animals, it would transition into a chilling and barren land. Looking at the people in front of him who have completely lost their minds and were dominated by the madness in their hearts, the Holy Son of Heaven's face was still calm, but there was unconcealable sadness in his eyes. He had to show peace. This is the philosophy that has always been in the heart of the Holy Son of Heaven. However, looking at the chaotic situation in front of him, the Holy Son of Heaven felt that everything he has done in the past was in vain, and the feeling in his heart was imaginable. Of course, the Holy Son of Heaven also knew that these people did not really want to vent their violence, but because of the fear, panic, and terror in their hearts, the people of the Tokyo area fell into a situation where they could not control themselves. This is the bad side of human beings. An unavoidable bad side. Therefore, I must understand. While telling himself this, the Holy Son of Heaven couldn't help but think of the boy who was not afraid of power, not afraid of his identity, extremely strong, domineering, and not lacking in gentleness in front of him, and left a particularly deep impression on him. Naturally, the Holy Son of Heaven also involuntarily thought of the other party's words. I don't find a reason to protect the Tokyo area, to protect those who only have hatred left, and to treat a group of children cruelly. How much did these words fit in with the current situation? Thinking of this, the Holy Son of Heaven's heart was depressed, but he still had to maintain a calm face. Unfortunately, it didn't take long for this calm to be completely broken. In the crowd of the Tokyo area residents gathered in the periphery, a chaotic sound of footsteps could be clearly heard even in the noisy scene, attracting everyone's attention. Get out of the way! Get out of the way! A group of fierce-looking people, armed with weapons and accompanied by children of about 10 years old, who were obviously a group of policemen, violently separated the crowd and made a path. Just when the residents who were violently separated were about to curse out loud, the next moment, a group of people walked into the inner circle of the sacred residence from outside the road, causing a brief silence to appear in the noisy and chaotic scene. In front of the gate of the sacred residence, the Holy Son of Heaven looked over here, and when he saw the full appearance of the leader of the group who walked in from outside the crowd, he was slightly startled and exclaimed, "President Noah." After shouting this, the Holy Son of Heaven fell silent as well. Not for anything else. Because, at this moment, although Noah's face had the same calm look as before, the depression in his pair of deep eyes made the Holy Son of Heaven's heart inexplicably tighten, and his whole heart was in his mouth. And the people didn't seem to expect that the target of their attack would suddenly appear here, and for a moment, they forgot to speak. In front of everyone, Noah walked into the crowd with the people of Fairy Tale and came to the front of the sacred residence, not far from the Holy Son of Heaven. Looking at the somewhat uneasy eyes of the Holy Son of Heaven, Noah waved his hand expressionlessly, and behind him, the people of Fairy Tale threw the group of people who had been escorting the group of people who were tied up on the ground. With a few thuds, the group of people who had been tied up fell to the ground, crying out in pain. Inside, the bodyguard with a face full of blood was struggling as if on the verge of death. Snot and tears flowed all over the ground. The people seemed to be shocked by this scene, and they all looked at each other, speechless for a long time. What's going on? The Holy Son of Heaven looked at the people who fell to the ground and couldn't hide his uneasiness. President Noah, what are you doing? Noah first closed his eyes, and then slowly opened them. These people are the criminals who just planted bombs in Fairy Tale and attempted to commit murder. The crowd suddenly went silent. Noah's short sentence was enough for everyone to understand the whole process of the whole thing, and even the cause and effect of this incident. The Holy Son of Heaven also understood why he felt inexplicably uneasy. Anxious, he opened his mouth and wanted to say something, but he was interrupted by Noah in advance. I'm here to ask everyone a question. With his back turned, Noah faced the crowd, looked around at everyone, and his voice echoed clearly. Let me ask you, do you hate these children so much that you can't wait for them to all die? As soon as this sentence came out, a stifling silence suddenly filled the crowd. Then, the crowd erupted with such voices. A group of monsters. All of them deserved to die. It was as if a fuse had been lit. Everyone in the audience began to shout loudly. Chapter 155. In the square of the holy abode, the angry shouts of the residents of the Tokyo area continued to reverberate, as if Noah's question had angered everyone. The noise reverberated through the sky at a deafening frequency. The Holy Son, who had no time to stop it, could only watch the scene unfold with a wry smile and closed his eyes. The residents in front of him, who had been overwhelmed by their emotions, did not know what the consequences of their actions would be. But the Holy Son, who already had a certain understanding of Noah, knew. Next, things would not end well. In the face of the angry shouts from all around, the people of Fairy Tale did not waver. They only cast their eyes on Noah, their eyes full of trust. After getting along with each other for a whole year, everyone in Fairy Tale knew that Noah would never let them suffer a loss. Is this your answer? In the face of the angry shouts from all directions, Noah's voice was like a whisper, but the coldness contained in it made the surrounding voices disappear in an instant. Immediately, Noah's eyes swept across the audience. Everyone who met Noah's gaze was frightened by the coldness in his deep dark pupils. They could not help but lower their heads, not daring to look at Noah. Noah retracted his gaze after looking around at the residents and said faintly, "Don't worry, I'm not going to give you a chance. If this is your answer, then, today, I will satisfy your request." After saying this, Noah turned around and looked directly at the Holy Son. In a clear voice, he said a sentence that shocked the audience. Holy Son of Heaven, all members of Fairy Tale have withdrawn from the selection of spots to enter the underground bunker. We ask Holy Son of Heaven to give these spots to the residents of Tokyo. The Holy Son was suddenly stunned. Not only the Holy Son, but also the surrounding people were all stunned for a moment. Oh, 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 oh. When they came to their senses, the residents looked at each other and broke out into cheers. Undoubtedly, this was taking away the chance to live, indirectly taking away the lives of others. There were at least 1,000 residents of the Tokyo area here, but they did not feel guilty at all. As if they had won some kind of victory, they cheered in unison. In response to this, the members of Fairy Tale who were standing in the middle of the crowd all had their own reactions, but none of them said anything. This was a sign of absolute trust in Fairy Tale. Even if, now, Noah's decision was equivalent to cutting off their last chance to live in the Tokyo area. At the moment when all the people around cheered in unison, Noah sneered. In the next second, Noah's words froze the cheers of the audience. At the same time, we, fairy tale, will also withdraw from the battle to protect the Tokyo area. Wadash! The Holy Sun's beautiful face suddenly turned pale. At the scene, many smart people also realized how big of an impact Noah's words would have. Their faces changed dramatically, and cold sweat flowed down their faces. As for the rest of the residents, after a while, they understood the importance of this sentence after being hinted at or told by others. Due to the special way in which the fairy tale existed, the initiator and promoter of the fairy tale were both excellent. Unlike other initiators, Fairy Tale's initiator had received combat training from the beginning, and was much stronger than the average initiator. Fairy Tale's promoter was also allowed to partner with the cursed child because of Noah's personal approval. It was also better than other promoters. In addition to Fairy Tale's special way of operating the guild, there were also many foreign police partners who joined Fairy Tale. Among them, there were countless strong police officers. To put it bluntly, in the entire Tokyo area, almost half of the famous police officers were in Fairy Tale. To put it bluntly, in the entire Tokyo area, Fairy Tale's police officers accounted for a large part of the total number of police officers. In other words, if Fairy Tale's police officers really withdrew from the battle to protect the Tokyo area in the future, it was equivalent to digging out a large part of the police force in the Tokyo area. In this way, if the battle to protect the area in the future needed police officers, then the probability of the Tokyo area being destroyed would increase exponentially with the withdrawal of Fairy Tale. In the end, Noah's decision was likely to be the last straw that would destroy the Tokyo area. President Noah. Shinzi stepped forward as if he couldn't tolerate it, and raised his voice a little. How can you do this? Why not? Noah looked at Shinzi with an emotionless gaze. Since the people here want us to die, then why should we protect the people who want us to die? But, what problem can you solve by doing this? Shinzi said with some agitation. You are also people who live in the Tokyo area. If the entire Tokyo area is destroyed, can you still survive? This is what we need to care about. Noah glanced at Shinzi. You don't have to worry about it, Shinzi. Shinzi still wanted to say something, but Noah was too lazy to continue listening. Turning around, in front of all the people and the cameras, Noah made such a declaration. Although most people are stupid, even the remaining few smart people have to take responsibility for their words and actions once they do something wrong. So, if the Tokyo area is destroyed in the future, most of the people here will die in the hands of the protogut animals. Then, don't forget that the people who will force away the power to save you will be yourselves. It's you who made the declaration that those who protect you should die. It's you who created your own path to death. Don't ever forget about this, Anne. Noah pulled out the gun at his waist, aimed at the forehead of Takahito, who fell to the ground, and pulled the trigger. Bang! After a gunshot, Zhuo Ren's head exploded. His head was directly blown apart by a bullet that was comparable to an anti-tank sniper rifle. Bang, 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 bang. At the same time, the rest of the members of Fairy Tale also opened fire, killing all the people on the ground. Everyone was stunned. Including the Holy Son of Heaven. Remember this. Noah glanced around coldly. This is the result of attacking Fairy Tale. With that, Noah led the members of Fairy Tale away from the scene in a deathly silence. Only then did the surrounding people let out miserable shrieks when they saw the blood and corpses splattered all over the ground. The reporters were also reporting passionately with pale faces. The Holy Son of Heaven stared at the corpses on the ground and then looked in the direction of Noah's departure. At this moment, his slender figure seemed extremely lonely. Why? Why did it come to such a point? Chapter 156. Bang! As soon as Noah returned to his home, he collapsed on the sofa. His face, which did not change even when he was in front of all the members of Fairy Tale, was now filled with exhaustion. President, brother, Xiaoshi, Yanzhu, and Hina looked at Noah, who collapsed on the sofa with a tired face. Their eyes were filled with heartache and worry. But even so, there was no way to get rid of Noah's exhaustion. It was not physical exhaustion. Instead, it was the mental and emotional exhaustion. Noah was really disappointed. Very, very disappointed. Although he already knew that this world was too desperate and chaotic, and that the humans in this world were also very unbearable, Noah did not expect them to be unbearable to this extent. Undoubtedly, the cursed children were all contributing their strength to protect these ordinary people and fight against the enemies of humanity. Why could these people still have a face as if the heavens were on their side, and it was natural for them to hate the cursed children, and to reject the cursed children as a matter of course? Moreover, more importantly, they could still treat the children who were protecting them as monsters, and without a care in the world, they could still make declarations like, all of them deserve to die. Did they know how ugly their actions were? Did they know that what they were doing was discrediting all of humanity? Did they know that they were personally taking revenge on their saviors? Did they know that by doing this, in the end, they were only weakening the power and hope of humanity to defeat the primitive animals, and in the end, the people who were harmed were themselves? From the moment he made up his mind to protect Fairy Tale, Noah was mentally prepared to become enemies with all the humans who were hostile to the cursed children. However, Noah still did not expect that there were so many people like this. It seemed that even in the plundered generation, there were radicals and stabilizers. The radicals were those who hated the cursed children very much. The stabilizers were those who usually rejected the cursed children, and hid their hatred deep in their hearts, and did not show it. Now, in the face of a life and death crisis, these people all tore apart their disguises, and showed all the ugliness and hatred in their hearts, and there was no way to hide it anymore. So, until now, Noah knew that the people who were hostile to the cursed children were not only more than he thought, but also more ruthless. Noah was already disappointed. He was disappointed in the humans of this world. However, even so, those people were still people. Even if it was a guy who wanted to blow up the entire Fairy Tale, he was still a human. Noah, who was lying on the sofa, raised his hand. Noah's hands were trembling. In the end, it was stained with blood, 7 years. It had already been 7 years since he started to live with his own consciousness. In these 7 years, Noah learned a lot. Magic. Sword. Shooting. Martial arts. Language. Music. And so on, countless. And today, it was the first time in 7 years that Noah learned something that he did not want to learn. Killing. The bodyguard was the first person in Noah's life that he had killed with his own hands. Before this, only monsters or primitive animals died in Noah's hands. This was the first time for him to kill a human. Even if the other party was the kind of person that he hated the most. President. Xiaoshi came in front of Noah without him noticing. He reached out and held Noah's trembling hand, and a pair of clear eyes looked straight into Noah's eyes. Big brother. Tina also made her way over to Noah with an earnest expression as she held onto his hand tightly. President. Even Yanzhu also came in front of Noah. Although her face was a little pale, she still firmly held Noah's hand. Noah's trembling hand suddenly steadied, and his heart also calmed down. Looking at the 3 little girls who were looking at him with a face full of concern, he laughed bitterly. Sorry, I made you worry. Please don't say that. Xiaoshi shook his head. We know very well who you are doing this for. Brother killed those people in front of so many people, it was also to intimidate them, right? Tina also smiled gently. Undoubtedly, only by telling those people what will happen if they attack Fairy Tale, then the same thing will not continue to happen in fairy tale, right? You killed people to protect us. Yenju's face was full of guilt. So, the ones who should be apologizing should be us. So you've seen through it all. Noah forced a smile. I thought it was very difficult to see through me. I didn't think that this time, I was seen through by you three little girls. When the three of you grow up, you will definitely be smarter than me, right? Xia Shi, Yenju, and Tina only shook their heads, but didn't say a word. They held Noah's hand tightly, as if they wanted to take away the fear in his heart of killing someone for the first time, and continued to exert strength. In the police, many of them were either ruffians or criminals who had committed serious crimes. Supervisor Jiang wasn't just a ruffian. At the same time as the police, it wasn't as if he hadn't done some immoral things. Killing people was one of them. And Xia Shi, who had followed Supervisor Jiang, had also killed people under Supervisor Jiang's orders. So, Xia Shi understood Noah's feelings very well at this time. As for Tina, there was no need to talk about it. As a former assassin, Tina had learned who knows how many assassination methods, and it wasn't as if she hadn't personally killed someone before. And even if she had done it before, Tina would still feel scared every time she killed someone. So, Tina was also the one who understood Noah's feelings the most. On the other hand, Yenju had always lived under the protection of Noah and Fairy Tale, plus her partner was Rintaro, so naturally she didn't have the experience of killing people. But, Yenju thought about it. If she killed someone, what would it be like? Thinking about it like this, Yenju also understood Noah's feelings. Noah heaved a faint sigh at the sight of Xia Shi, Yenju, and Tina's comforting expressions. Don't you guys care about my decision? This time, not only did Noah give up the opportunity to enter the underground bunker for Fairy Tale, he also gave up on protecting Tokyo, and planned to watch from the sidelines. The former was a chance for a few people to save their lives, the latter could lead to the destruction of Tokyo, and Fairy Tale would also suffer. No matter how you look at it, Noah's decision seemed to be forcing Fairy Tale into a dead end. But even so, Fairy Tale's people still chose to trust Noah and follow Noah's orders. Regarding this, Noah was indeed moved, but it was hard to guarantee that the people who trusted him wouldn't feel uneasy. Xia Shi and Tina looked at each other before replying in unison. We respect the President's, brother's, decision. I also respect the President's decision. Yenju said loudly, but her voice became weaker. But, what should I do about Rintaro? Yenju. Noah patted Yenju's little head. You don't have to worry about my decision, go participate in the war without worry. Yenju was stunned, and then became anxious. This concubine is also a member of Fairy Tale. I know. When I said that, I didn't mean to deny that you're not a member of Fairy Tale, Noah explained. But, if you don't do anything, Rintaro will be in danger, you have to protect him. This concubine understands. Yenju nodded in relief. I'll protect Rintaro. Noah smiled, turned his head, and looked at the sky outside the window. Hopefully, there won't be any more accidents. Chapter 157. There was still one more day before the monolith would collapse. As the countdown gradually approached, the situation in the Tokyo area became more and more chaotic. Now, the price of a plane ticket to other areas had already been raised to a sky-high price. In order to be able to gather enough money to buy a plane ticket to other areas, the residents of the Tokyo area had already gone completely crazy. Stealing and robbing had become the most common daily activities in the Tokyo area. If someone walked into the downtown area of the Tokyo area, then they would have discovered it. The supermarkets, shops, shopping centers, production factories, and other places had already been robbed clean. All of the goods had disappeared, leaving behind only broken glass and some bloodstains that silently accused violence. In addition, some of the rich people's houses had also been broken into by a group of crazy residents like bandits, leaving behind broken doors that swayed back and forth in the cold wind, making gg sounds. The entire Tokyo area had already become a hellish place. Even when the situation was so chaotic, some controversial topics were still circulating. Among them, the matter of fairy tale occupied at least 80% of the range. Through the live broadcast, the declaration that Noah made in front of everyone that day had already become a big event that no one did not know about. Regarding the matter of that day, many people also had their own opinions. The people who still retained their sense of reason hated those fellows who were also human beings. They felt that they were discrediting the entire human race, and directly caused the entire Tokyo area to lose a huge force to protect it. They cursed and scolded them endlessly. The people who had lost their sense of reason seemed to have begun to feel afraid of the consequences of their actions, but they did not have the slightest bit of self-reflection or regret, falling into a complete daze. And the people who witnessed everything that day, and the culprits who caused all of this, on one hand, were secretly afraid, on the other hand, they pretended to be calm, indignantly expressing that even if there was no police, the Tokyo area still had the self-defense forces. With the protection of the self-defense forces, even if there was no police, it would not matter. This was the thought of most of the people who were present that day. But it was also pardonable. After all, although the self-defense forces did not have an initiator, partner, and lacked a strong individual strength, they still had a lot of influence. In the past, there had been 2 large-scale wars with protozoa in the Tokyo area. The first time was in 2021, which was when protozoa first appeared in the human world. That war divided the country into 5 regions. In order to expand the defense line, the self-defense forces fought against the primitive animals in the Tokyo area. After many people sacrificed their lives, they barely stopped the attack of the primitive animals and successfully evacuated the survivors to the current Tokyo area. That war was known as the First Great Battle of Guangdong. The second occurred several years after the Great War that followed the appearance of the protozoa. At that time, the protogut animals gathered again and attacked the Tokyo area. However, this time, through research, humans had understood that the magnetic field emitted by the clam could weaken the vitality of protogut animals. Thus, with the monolith as the boundary, the self-defense forces successfully repelled the protozoa using weaponry made from aluminum. That war was known as the Second Great Battle of Guangdong. This time, because of Aldebaran, the Tokyo area once again faced a crisis. The upcoming war between the Tokyo area and the assembled protozoa became the Third Great Battle of Guangdong. With the experience of successfully repelling the protozoa in the Second Great Battle of Guangdong, many people hoped that this time, the self-defense forces could also repel the protozoa and protect the entire Tokyo area. Therefore, almost all residents of the Tokyo area used this reasonable excuse to convince themselves that what they did that day was not wrong. However, Noah's declaration that day still aroused many people's suspicion. He gave up the opportunity to enter the underground bunker to save his life and gave up protecting the Tokyo area, which was equivalent to a community of life. Was Fairy Tale really not afraid of death? In this regard, many people also had their own opinions. Some people thought that Noah was extremely stupid and hypocritical. He was so strong in front of everyone, but when the Tokyo area was really finished, he would reveal his true colors and could only join the ranks of the escapees with his tail between his legs. Some people thought that Noah was also skeptical about whether the police could stop the attack of the protozoa, so he planned to stand by and leave the mess to the self-defense forces. He would not participate in it himself. If he saw that the situation was not good, he would definitely have other plans. However, some people who thought that they were smart felt that since Noah made such a declaration in front of so many people, unless he really did not want to live, this declaration was definitely not as simple as it seemed on the surface. Therefore, one day, such a news report appeared in newspapers and on the internet. Quitting does not mean that you do not want to live. Fairy Tale, is there a way for me to survive? As soon as this report came out, it immediately caused an uproar and gained the approval of almost everyone. In this way, there was also an explanation for why Noah made such a declaration so confidently. Because of this, a series of questions were also triggered. President Xiaoshu carried a whole pile of papers and walked to Noah's desk with some effort. He threw them on it and said in a rare embarrassed manner, "This was just sent in." Hearing this, Noah, who was sitting at the desk, sighed heavily. "Are they here to apply to join Fairy Tale again?" "Yes." Xiaoshu nodded helplessly. "These people seem to believe that we have a way to save their lives. All of them have come to seek refuge with Fairy Tale, hoping to be protected by Fairy Tale. Then just like before, find someone to seriously review them." Noah waved his hand impatiently. "It's still the same 3 requirements. Those who don't hate the cursed child, those who can accept the cursed child, and those who have good moral character, let them join. The rest of you, chase them out." "Got it." Xiaoshu nodded, picked up the tall pile of papers, and walked out with difficulty. As for Hina, she had already come here 10 minutes ago with a pile of applications like Xiaoshu. At this time, the door was opened again. "Same as before," Noah said without looking up. "Just find someone to review them." However, this time, Noah did not wait for a crisp answer, but a silence. Noah, who was puzzled, looked up and saw a man and a woman. It was Rintaro and Mugino. "Why are you here?" Noah looked at Mugino with some surprise. "Is your body okay? The most basic movement is no longer an obstacle." Mugino answered honestly. "But if you want to fight, I'm afraid you'll have to wait for a while." "Then it's not a problem." Noah shrugged. "Anyway, it's best to see you healthy." Mugino smiled. On the side, Rintaro, who had been silent all this time, looked up at Noah and whispered, "Have you really made up your mind?" The words came out of nowhere, but Noah smiled indifferently. "I knew you would come to me." "You knew?" Rintaro was slightly taken aback. "That's right." Noah met Rintaro's gaze. "After all, I've said before that you're the kind of person who would sacrifice yourself without hesitation if you can carry out a righteous cause. Even the people around you would hesitate to sacrifice themselves. So, I've long guessed that you would come here to question me for the lives of those people." Rintaro was speechless. Basically, Noah had guessed Rintaro's purpose for coming here. Rintaro came here to question Noah why he didn't use Fairy Tale to protect Tokyo, and why he gave up the opportunity to enter the underground bunker. Chapter 158. Noah once said in front of Rintaro that Rintaro was the kind of person who would sacrifice himself for the greater good. At that time, Rintaro even refuted him, saying that he wasn't the kind of person who would die early. Unfortunately, Ryutaru's questioning had exposed the essence of righteousness hidden deep within him. "I just don't understand why you're doing this." Rintaro clicked his tongue, as if he was a dead duck who refused to admit his mistake. "It's not for the greater good." "Is that so?" Noah looked deeply at Rintaro. "Do you really not understand why I'm doing this?" Rintaro opened his mouth, but he was at a loss for words for the second time. It would be a lie to say that he didn't understand why Noah was doing this. After all, even an idiot would know that Noah was representing the fairy tale to make such a declaration. It was to protect the cursed children living in the fairy tale. People could not tolerate the cursed children, and they even wanted all of them to die. Noah, on the other hand, wanted to protect these children so that they could live happily. Therefore, Noah made such a sound on behalf of these children who were used to being bullied. It was just like what Noah said before. Standpoint. Because of the difference in standpoint. Therefore, Noah had to stand on the opposite side of the entire Tokyo area. Even if that's the case, there's no need to use such an extreme method, right? Rintaro couldn't let it go. Are you really going to watch the entire Tokyo area die in the hands of the protogut animals? Why not? Noah said indifferently. Since they can casually say that they want us to die, why can't we just watch them die? You're too extreme. Rintaro said loudly. Just because they don't treat you well, you're going to watch them die. That's why I said, Rintaro, I'm not like you. Noah was still as calm as ever. If someone hurts the people around me, then I definitely won't be able to persuade myself to let them go for the sake of the so-called righteous cause. Fairy Tale will always exist for the sake of her family and companions. I should have told you that before. Rintaro's expression was conflicted. He still couldn't let it go. Mugging, who had personally witnessed the conversation between the two, could only sigh inwardly. From Mugento's point of view as a bystander, both Noya and Rintaro's statements were correct. The difference was that Noah's point of view was from the perspective of his family and companions, while Rintaro's point of view was from the perspective of the entire Tokyo region and even all of humanity. One was for the sake of justice. Another was for the greater good. Who could say that Noah and Rintaro were wrong? Rintaro seemed to understand this as well. He also understood that he couldn't force others to work hard to protect others. That sounded very noble, but unfortunately, how many people could do that? Even Rintaro couldn't be sure that he didn't have a selfish side. Moreover, Noah wasn't being selfish. He wasn't just trying to protect himself. He was simply giving Rintaro a taste of his own medicine. If others treated him well, he would treat them well. If others didn't treat him well, he would return the favor 100-fold. The president of the fairy tale was Noah Doria. This was the most basic principle of how he conducted himself in this world. Rintaro, who could understand this, sighed dispiritedly. But you're also causing a huge impact, aren't you? Noah's declaration not only made the fairy tale stand on the opposite side of the entire Tokyo area, but it also caused all kinds of problems. Fairy Tale had other means of survival, which led to a large number of people requesting to join Fairy Tale, in an attempt to obtain the protection of Fairy Tale was one thing. Noah's actions also caused three major impacts. The first was that some people had already begun to propose the abolition of the new law of primitive animals. The reason was also very simple. It was because Noah had publicly announced that Fairy Tale would no longer contribute to the protection of the Tokyo area. A group of officials in the Tokyo area felt that there was no need to give basic human rights to the cursed child, who did not protect humans. However, this proposal didn't have any effect. The reason was that the cursed children in the fairy tale didn't represent all the cursed children. Moreover, the fairy tale also had people other than the cursed children. According to this argument, if the cursed children in the fairy tale didn't work, then the human rights of all the cursed children would be abolished. If the fairy tale people didn't work, then the human rights of all the human beings would be deprived. Therefore, this proposal was still in a state of controversy. At present, as long as there were no accidents, it would be depressed sooner or later. Second, on that day, Noah brought the fairy tale people and killed a group of people led by Takahito in front of everyone's eyes. Killing people in front of everyone's eyes caused a large number of people to react violently. The people all believed that this kind of organization that would casually kill ordinary people was a complete criminal and terrorist organization. They should all be arrested and brought to justice, or even sentenced to death. Unfortunately, this argument was also controversial. This was because the group of people led by Takahito was a felon who wanted to plant a bomb in the fairy tale. On the other hand, the members of Fairy Tale, led by Noah, were basically all police officers. They had the most basic right to crack down on crimes. Shooting and killing felons was not considered a crime. It could only be said that they were carrying out the right to self-defense and the right to take control of the situation. However, the fairy tale shot the captured criminals on the spot in front of everyone, which made many people feel that this was already in the category of wantonly killing criminals. Therefore, this issue had been debated for a long time. As for the last issue, it was the impact of the actions of the residents of the Tokyo area that day. After Noah announced that he would not participate in the war, the residents of Tokyo who rejected the cursed children for various reasons showed that it didn't matter if there were self-defense forces, even if there were no police. This attitude made many police officers who were eager to protect the Tokyo area feel disappointed. They were all angry and disappointed. They worked so hard to protect the Tokyo area with their lives, but in the end, they were treated like this. Who wouldn't be disappointed? Coupled with the news that the fairy tale had other means to save their lives, many police officers who chose to go to the battlefield because they would die if they did not protect the Tokyo area no longer had any worries. One by one, they chose to join the fairy tale and joined the ranks of those who did not participate in the war. These three effects made the already chaotic Tokyo area even more chaotic. This was what Rintaro was referring to. What's wrong? Noah could not help but laugh in response. You think this is my fault? That's not what I meant. Rintaro stuttered. As mentioned before, Noah's approach was not wrong. Or rather, when people were treated badly, it was impossible for them to repay evil with good. That was human nature. At this moment, Mugging, who inadvertently looked out the window, narrowed his eyes and shouted in shock. How is this possible? Hearing Mugging scream, Noah and Rintaro, who were about to start a new round of debate, were stunned. They followed Mugging's gaze and looked out the window. The next moment, the scene that was imprinted in their eyes made Noah and Rentaro's pupils constrict. A feeling of shock started from the soles of their feet, rushed up their bodies, and spread to the top of their heads. Chapter 159. Below the gloomy clouds, a gigantic monolith that seemed to be able to pierce through the clouds stood there. Unlike the other monolith, this gigantic monolith's pitch-black luster had faded by more than half, and the remaining parts were covered with white spots or stains. Number 32, Monolith. This monolith, which had guarded the Tokyo area for more than 5 years, finally made a sound that made people's hair stand on end. Gag. Undoubtedly, it was very far away from the monolith's location, but everyone in the Tokyo area seemed to have heard this sharp sound, and turned to look in the direction of the monolith. Then, almost everyone saw it. On the towering monolith number 32, which was originally a rectangle, one of its corners suddenly collapsed. Kacha kacha kacha. As if it had caused a chain reaction, the gigantic monolith, from top to bottom, let out a cracking sound, and then, as if it had been pushed down by a huge force, it gradually fell down. Pang 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 pang. Everyone could clearly hear that the monolith seemed to have shattered, and in the midst of the explosive sounds, because it couldn't withstand the corrosion of the corrosive liquid, it turned into pieces, and as it collapsed, it fell in all directions like meteorites. Compared to the monolith itself, the process of the monolith fragments collapsing and falling to the ground seemed to be played in slow motion, one piece after another smashing into the ground. Dong 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 dong. The meteorite-like fragments of the monolith collided with the ground violently, crushing the ground, buildings, trees, equipment, and other objects under them, smashing them into pieces. Rumble. The frequent collisions caused the ground to shake, and the dust from the shattered monolith flew in all directions. The wind from the impact also blew in all directions, spreading out in all directions. Finally, a mushroom-shaped cloud of dust that could cover the entire Tokyo area's sky rose up, like the smoke before a war, and imprinted itself into everyone's eyes. After witnessing the entire process, the residents of the Tokyo area finally reacted. One by one, they let out a blood-curdling scream. Subconsciously, their goal was to get as far away from the collapsed monolith number 32 as they frantically fled. How could this, in fairy tale, Noah and Mugging, who had also witnessed the entire process, were speechless. Only Rintaro, who couldn't accept it, muttered, "This is impossible. There should still be a day before the collapse of monolith number 32, right? Could it be that the sage son of heaven made a mistake in his calculations? It's the wind." Noah looked at the sky, and saw the clouds being blown away by the strong wind, and the dust and smoke in the distance, and said in a deep voice, "The wind has toppled the monolith." Hearing this, Mugging finally reacted. "Riki-kun!" Mugging shouted at Rintaro. "Quick! The third Kanto war has begun." "Noah!" Rintaro also reacted, and anxiously looked at Noah. "Are you really not going to participate in the war?" Noah glanced at Rintaro, and without saying anything, he turned around and silently expressed his intention. "Damn it!" Rintaro cursed, and directly rushed out of Noah's room, and rushed in the direction of the monolith. In the direction of the monolith, District 40 of the outer area, the auxiliary police force was gathered there, and prepared to fight against the attacking protozoa. However, without Fairy Tale's participation in the battle, as well as the large number of police officers who intended to join Fairy Tale, the number of police auxiliary troops sent to the battle should be much less than what everyone had initially thought, right? Before the auxiliary police force is dispatched, the self-defense forces will fight against the attacking protozoa. If the self-defense forces can win, then everything is going well. If the self-defense forces lose, then without the Fairy Tale, the auxiliary police force will have to fight against the protozoa that defeated the self-defense forces. At that time, the situation will not be optimistic. "Are you really not going?" Mugging looked into the distance, and said to Noah without looking back. "Without the Fairy Tale, the auxiliary police force will not be able to stop the attack of the protozoa." "What?" Noah also did not look back, as if he was talking to the air, and said to himself, "Do you also want me to carry out the so-called righteousness and save a group of people who want us dead?" Mugging was silent for a while, and then he smiled bitterly. "Although I want to say that, I definitely don't think so in my heart." Hearing this, Noah raised his head in confusion. "What do you mean?" "What do I mean?" Mugging lowered his head and murmured, "I mean that I envy you, because you still have the chance to protect your family and friends." After that, Mugging also walked out of the room and left the scene. Looking in the direction where Mugging disappeared, Noah closed his eyes. Mugging changed. He became not only immersed in hatred, but also immersed in memories. Thinking about it, the success of the kidney transplant surgery will free Mugging from the abyss and let him enter a new world, right? Fairy Tale, the main building. This was the place where the police officers of Fairy Tale gathered in the past to receive commissions, submit completed tasks, receive rewards, and record their results. The commission board with the commission list was a bulletin board on the side wall that could be seen as soon as he entered the door. Pushing open the door of the main building, Noah walked into the main building. President. At this moment, in the main building, almost all the police of Fairy Tale gathered here. When they saw Noah come in, they immediately greeted Noah. Noah nodded, then walked forward in the middle of the crowd that automatically separated, and came in front of a huge screen. It was a large electronic screen used on weekdays for various emergency notifications and relaying relevant reports in the Tokyo area. At this time, the big screen was broadcasting the live broadcast of the collapse of the monolith on number 32. Originally, there would not be this kind of live broadcast on the battlefield. However, Noah had ordered someone to place a camera and a bug in the sky above monolith number 32, so that the situation there could be broadcasted back. Therefore, Noah could clearly see what was happening there at this time. The shocking dust and debris brought by the collapse of monolith turned into smoke, forming thick clouds that covered the sky of the entire Tokyo area. The Tokyo area self-defense forces position also seemed to have been directly attacked by the monolith's smoke and dust that was blown over by the wind. Under such circumstances, on the big screen, the self-defense force and a group of attacking monsters began to confront each other. Roar! Roar! Woo! The various roars of the protozoa were clearly transmitted throughout the main building through the high-power bugs on the electronic eye. Through the live broadcast on the big screen, Noah saw a huge figure in the middle of a large number of protozoa, under the support of a large number of protozoa, running in the direction of the Tokyo area. Looking at the huge figure, Noah slowly narrowed his eyes. Former Taurus Legion subordinate, Aldebaran. Chapter 160. Unlike the rest of the protozoa, Aldebaran was very eye-catching. Based on its size alone, Aldebaran was dozens of times larger than the rest of the protozoa. It was as huge as a small mountain. Even from a distance, one could hear the tremors of the ground when it ran. As for the full appearance of Aldebaran, it was impossible to express it in words. As a stage 4 protozoan, Aldebaran's body contained at least a few dozen or even a few hundred species factors. The original appearance of these dozens or hundreds of species could more or less be seen on Aldebaran's body. Therefore, if one were to use a phrase to describe it, Aldebaran was a mountain of meat and carapace with an extremely long mouth of a crocodile. Just based on this form alone, Aldebaran was even more breathtaking than a normal stage 4 protogut animal. Roar! 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 Amidst the roars and support of all kinds of protozoa, the huge army of protozoa led by Aldebaran advanced side by side. The raised sand and dust flooded the horizon behind them. Bang! Then, with such a dull sound as the source, the artillery from the self-defense forces camp fired in unison. Self-propelled cannons, tank cannons, autocannons, and all kinds of long-distance artillery shells fired at the same time. They drew a perfect trajectory and killed the army of protozoa. Bang 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 bang. The sound of explosions rang continuously throughout the entire battlefield. From the big screen, a group of police officers led by Noah who stayed in the main building saw the front row of protozoa being blown away. The raging flames were like dragons and snakes, rising high into the sky. However, in the flames, the second row of protozoa led the army of protozoa surged out and continued to charge in the direction of the Tokyo area. Bang 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 bang. In order to meet the attack, in the self-defense forces camp, the sound of artillery fire also rang out, making the entire battlefield lively. The battlefield was fiery red. The sky seemed to be burning as well, a fiery red. In the fairy tale, many police officers who saw this scene clenched their fists and gritted their teeth, bearing some kind of emotion with a heavy face. Except for the children, almost all the police officers here had seen the war when the protozoa first appeared 10 years ago. It was a hellish scene. Burning streets. Burning farms. Even people who were burning. The dark sky and the bright red flames formed a perfect dividing line. Presumably, now, the battlefield presented on the big screen made these policemen present involuntarily recall the hellish scene 10 years ago, right? However, regardless of the feelings of these police officers, on the big screen, the deafening explosions of cannons and impacts that could shake the atmosphere from the battlefield were mixed with the low growls, roars, and howls of the primitive animals. They kept ringing one after another. Noah was also watching the whole thing in silence. After an unknown amount of time, the sound of gunfire gradually subsided, and the cries of the protogut animals also became softer. Then, whether it was the protozoa side or the self-defense forces camp, they all abruptly fell silent. On the burning plains, the silence and darkness of the night covered everyone's vision, causing them to look at each other in dismay. How is it? Did the self-defense forces win? They should have won, right? Even the sound of the protozoa has disappeared. So, the self-defense forces should have repelled the protozoa and are now returning in triumph, right? In the vast hall, a group of policemen were talking and praising each other, but the tension in the air exposed their inner feelings. Obviously, the police officers of Fairy Tale were also nervous. Although Noah had made the decision not to participate in the war, everyone was still very concerned about how the war would develop next and what kind of fate the Yodo region would face. Only Noah, while a group of police officers praised and talked, stared at the black smoke that covered the entire battlefield on the big screen in front of him, and his expression became more and more serious. After a while, Noah sighed. The self-defense forces were all wiped out. As soon as this sentence fell, in the black smoke that filled the battlefield, a large number of protogut animals rushed out frantically like a dense swarm of ants. Under the trembling sound of the earth, they rushed in the direction of the Yodo area. As for the self-defense forces, not a single person could be seen. Seeing this scene, everyone in the main building was speechless, and there was no way for them to speak. Probably, it was just as Noah said. The self-defense forces were all wiped out. More and more people stayed in the main building of Fairy Tale. Everyone looked at the image displayed on the big screen in silence. On the map, there were only about 100 groups. Including the initiator and promoter, there were only 200 police officers and the army of protozoa that had a great disparity in numbers. It might be an exaggeration to say that it was one-sided. After all, even if the promoter was not included, the initiator had the power to match or even surpass the protozoa. In the confrontation with the protozoa army, both sides suffered losses. However, careful people would be able to see that although both sides suffered losses, the advancement of the protozoa army did not decrease, and the front line formed by the police officers was losing ground. If this continued, the protozoa would sooner or later approach the interior of the Yodo region, flood into the Yodo region, and carry out a purposeless massacre. Seeing this, Noah was no longer interested in continuing to watch. However, in the next moment, Noah, who was about to turn around and leave, suddenly stopped and looked at the big screen in front of him. What is that? In the main building, a hoarse voice sounded. It was because the scene displayed on the big screen was almost incomprehensible to everyone present. In the sky of the battlefield, a dazzling beam of light suddenly fell from the sky, cut through the atmosphere and black smoke, and landed on the battlefield. The beam of light swept across nearly half of the battlefield. Individuals in the position swept by the beam of light, regardless of whether they were protozoa or humans, all disappeared from the scene. Suffering such a sudden attack, the police officers who formed the front line panicked and retreated even more. The situation of the battle took a turn for the worse. Whoosh! Everyone present was in an uproar. For a while, there was no way to stop. Even Noah frowned. What was that just now? A beam of light. Where did the beam come from? Was it an attack launched by the protozoa? If that was the case, the police auxiliary force would never have a chance of winning. The reality was just as Noah guessed. Under the threat of the inexplicable beam of light, the situation of the battle was truly one-sided. The people of the police auxiliary force were already retreating, resisting desperately while barely holding the front line. However, if this continued, sooner or later, the police would still be defeated. Woo 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 woo. At this moment, a long and drawn-out cry soared into the sky and drilled into everyone's ears. It was the cry of Aldebaran. However, the cry of Aldebaran was full of pain, as if it had suffered a major blow. When the cry of Aldebaran sounded, the protozoa that were originally attacking suddenly stopped attacking and began to move at the same time. The caterpillar-type protogut animals that crawled on the ground, as well as the insect-type and bird-type protogut animals that flew in the sky, gathered around the fifth sign of Bai. It was as if they were using their bodies as shields or to protect the fifth sign of Bai, protecting it. Under the protection of a large number of flying protozoa like mosquitoes, Aldebaran turned around and retreated. Looking at the protozoa army that gradually turned into a blurry shadow on the big screen, everyone began to discuss noisily. It seemed that because Aldebaran was injured, the protozoa army chose to retreat. the Yodo region temporarily escaped the disaster. Noah closed his eyes, turned around, and walked out of the main building. Just like that, the first scene of the Third Kanto War ended with the total destruction of the self-defense forces and the retreat of the Protozoa army. Chapter 161. The next day, standing by the window, Noah was looking at the scenery outside. It was a scene that made people wonder if they were in a dream. The sky was gray. Thick clouds covered the entire sky, and it was drizzling. However, the rain was black. Early this morning, the Tokyo area collectively had a black rain. This was not without reason. Yesterday, the monolith collapsed. According to news reports, when the monolith collapsed, a large amount of dust flew into the sky, and even reached the stratosphere, forming a thick rain cloud. The sun was thus covered, and the Tokyo area would not be able to see the sun for about 3 days. The earthquake caused by the collapse of the monolith spread throughout the country, and even the Bodo area and Hokkaido area felt the shaking. The seismic waves from the collapsed monolith circled half the Earth, and the Pikes Peak Meteorological Observatory in Colorado, USA measured the seismic waves and recorded that the Earth's atmospheric pressure rose by 0.3 HPA. The latest meteorological observation model showed that the white dust from the monolith and the dust that was swept up would be affected by the west wind and would spread to the north. It was estimated that the Hokkaido area would also be affected by the dust. Now, the black rain that fell on the entire Tokyo area was caused by the dust that was swept up when the monolith collapsed, and the dust from the monolith dissolved in the rain. The government said that although the black rain looked very vicious, there were no harmful substances in it, and even if the residents went out, they would not have to worry about the impact on their bodies. However, a lot of people were still skeptical about it. At the very least, no one would want to be drenched in the ominous rainwater that seemed to corrode their bodies at such a time. Therefore, including Fairy Tale, basically no one wanted to go out today. If possible, Noah also hoped that he would not go out. Unfortunately, reality was very cruel, and it shattered the little extravagant hope in his heart. Not long after, Noah's door was opened. Xiaoshi and Tina entered Noah's room together in a dress. They looked at Noah, who was standing by the window and looking at the dark sky outside, and called out in a hesitant manner. "President, brother." Hearing this, Noah did not turn around and continued to look out of the window. "What's the matter?" Xiaoshi and Tina glanced at each other. After a while, Xiaoshi opened his mouth to speak. "There are guests outside." "Customer." Noah's self-deprecating voice echoed. "Are you really here as a guest?" Xiaoshi and Tina fell silent at the same time. "Ah." Noah sighed faintly and turned around. "Where?" "Outside the fairy tale," Tina answered first. "There are too many of them, so they don't seem to want to enter the fairy tale." "Is that so?" Only then did Noah realize that he had to meet the customer in the rain. After another sigh, he lifted his feet and walked outside. The pitch-black rain fell to the ground with a splash sound. All the dry and cracked land in the outer area was dyed black. Mud, sand, and rainwater were all mixed together. Stepping on it made people feel like they were stepping on a swamp. It was very uncomfortable. With an umbrella in hand, Noah led Xiaoshi, Tina, and the police officers from Fairy Tale out of the gate and went outside. On the opposite side of the fairy tale, a group of people gathered together as if they were in a formation. They quietly waited for Noah's arrival. Rentaro and Yenju were among them. However, although Rentaro and Yenju were standing at the front, the people leading them were not them. The one leading them was a man over 50 years old. He was bald and had a beard. His whole body emitted the aura of a martial artist, the promoter. From his appearance, he looked to be at least 50 years old. Among the promoters, who were mainly between 20 and 40 years old. He could be considered older. Beside the elderly promoter, there should be the initiator. She had long black hair, a very faint presence, and a demure temperament. She stood there like a shadow. With this pair of police officers as the leader, the group of police officers stood in front of Noah. There was no doubt that this group of police officers were the auxiliary police force that forced the Aldebaran to retreat on the battlefield yesterday. Today, these police officers who were supposed to be at the front line were all gathered here. Looking at their formation, it was as if they were here to condemn him. The atmosphere was filled with an inexplicable sense of tension. Noah stopped about 5 meters away from the person with the fairy tale. "I presume that you are President Noah." The elderly man leading the group spoke with a dignified voice. "I am my hall chief. I am fortunate enough to become the army commander of this auxiliary police force." Noah slightly sized up my hall chief. His gaze suddenly stopped on one of his legs. No, it should not be said that it was a leg. Because the leg that should have been there had long disappeared. It was wrapped tightly in bandages. It was obvious that it had not been lost for long. My hall chief supported his missing leg with a crutch. He did not have the dispirited appearance of an ordinary disabled person. Instead, he was very dignified, and people could not help but admire him. Regarding this, Noah did not give any comments. He nodded at my hall chief. "I am the hall chief. Please state your intentions." I believe that President Noah should be able to easily guess my intentions. My hall chief used a sharp gaze to stare at Noah. "President Noah, please dispatch the fairy tale police to fight with us and guard the entire Tokyo area." The whole place was silent. Only my hall chief's loud voice echoed in the surroundings. It turned into an echo, and after a while, it dissipated in the air. Noah's gaze was directly cast on my hall chief's serious face. He did not immediately respond. Only when some people began to become impatient did Noah speak indifferently. "Is this the only thing you want to say?" "President Noah." My hall chief stared at Noah. There was a bit of anger in his eyes. "We now need your strength to guard the Tokyo area. Do you want to become the sinner that will cause the Tokyo area to perish?" "So that's how it is." Noah acted as if he did not hear the content of my hall chief's words. He suddenly smiled, but there was not a hint of a smile in his eyes. "In other words, you are here to denounce us." "You?" Seeing Noah ignore my hall chief's words, the girl standing beside my hall chief seemed to be unable to endure my hall chief being insulted. She stepped forward with a stern face. "Morning glow." My hall chief scolded. "Come back." The girl named Dawn Break stopped in her tracks and retreated back to where she came from. I don't care if Fairy Tale has other methods to save their lives. However, since you live in the Tokyo area, then you are citizens of the Tokyo area. My hall chief looked at Noah coldly. "President Noah, do you know that people who watch their country in danger and watch coldly from the sidelines are usually called traitors?" Traitors. As soon as this sentence was said, the policemen led by my hall chief, except for Rentaro and Yen Ju who had an anxious expression and wanted to say something, all of them showed an expression of indignation. On the other hand, the members of Fairy Tale, led by Noah, all had angry looks on their faces. They looked like they would charge out at any moment. "Are you trying to use the high hat of being righteous to pressure me?" On the contrary, Noah's gaze towards my hall chief gradually became bored. "I didn't think that you would use a boring method that even Tentong Chrysanthemum, that old guy, was not willing to use." Chapter 162. Clearly seeing Noah's uninterested expression, my hall chief tightly frowned, and his gaze on Noah became sharper and sharper. "It wasn't just me, Captain Takamasa. Apart from Rentaro and Yen Ju, the rest of the police auxiliary force also showed anger. Obviously, they were very dissatisfied with Noah's words. Noah said this, isn't he saying that my hall chief pretended to be sanctimonious and pretended to be arrogant? Since my hall chief said this, then let me ask you, have you ever seen a country's people say, all of you deserve to die, to their companions living in the same country? Not giving my hall chief any chance to explain, Noah held an umbrella and looked directly at my hall chief through the dark rain. My hall chief, you said that people who watch their country in danger and coldly watch from the sidelines, most people will call them traitors and traitors. Then, do you know that people who have been protecting them not only don't feel grateful, but are full of hatred? Most people will call them biting the hand that feeds them and biting the hand that feeds them. Everyone in the police auxiliary force was suddenly speechless. Not to mention the promoters, in the auxiliary police force, just the initiators, all showed depressed and sorrowful expressions. Needless to say, Noah's words completely entered their hearts. President Noah, I understand your feelings, but the people are ignorant, we can't let them do whatever they want. Sensing that their morale began to decline, my hall chief quickly said. Even if the people in the Tokyo area are not worth saving, this land is still our country. Even if it's not for the sake of the people, we still have to protect this country, right? Even my hall chief said the words not for the sake of the people. Obviously, the actions of the people in the Tokyo area also made this old police officer feel very disdain. However, Noah will not agree with my hall chief's statement. Good, this land is still our country. Noah said with a smile, and then said something that made everyone stunned. Then, my hall chief, how can you be sure that I'm a citizen of the Tokyo area? Even my hall chief, when he heard this, couldn't help but be stunned. Noah. Rintaro, who had been silent, couldn't help but blurt out with a face full of shock. Are you not a citizen of the Tokyo area? I came to the Tokyo area a year ago, and created fairy tale here, but I am indeed an outsider, you can see from the form of my name. If you don't believe me, you can check if there is any account of me in the Tokyo area. Noah said indifferently. And in this year, I have witnessed the ugly side of the people in the Tokyo area, witnessed the dark side of the politicians here, plus the suffering of the children. Please tell me, will I have a sense of belonging to this kind of land? The citizens of the Tokyo area are ignorant, but that is also their nature. Noah's voice clearly echoed around. Even if we save the Tokyo area, so what? Will they let go of their hatred for the cursed child? Will they be grateful to us for saving them? Will they accept our existence because of this? No. None of them. Noah said with extreme sarcasm. Not to mention the cursed child, even the police, when the time comes, will definitely not be thanked like a hero. This, as the so-called hero who killed Scorpio, I can guarantee you. Not a single person present could utter a single word of rebuttal. No matter where the police go, they belong to the group of people who are not welcome. Let's not talk about the problem of there being a lot of ruffians and even criminals among the police, let's talk about the world's view of the police. From the police's point of view, the police who intruded into the jurisdiction and interfered with the scene were like a thorn in their side. From the self-defense force's point of view, their duty of national defense was judged by the police. Of course, they would not put on a good face. For example, in the Third Kanto War, the police auxiliary force's legion must have been placed in a dispensable position in the name of the decisive force. The self-defense forces obviously hoped to solve the protozoa without relying on the police. As a result, in the end, the self-defense forces did not send a signal for help to the police auxiliary force until they were completely wiped out. This caused the police to act as if to make up for the lack of combat power after the protozoa defeated the self-defense forces. If the self-defense forces cooperated with the police auxiliary force from the beginning, it would definitely be a different situation. Now, the self-defense forces were completely wiped out, and the people of the police auxiliary force also injured Aldebaran at the cost of losing a leg, resulting in the temporary retreat of the protozoa army. Undoubtedly, this was something that even the self-defense forces could not do. However, in the eyes of the people in the Yodo area was still in a crisis. The results achieved by the police auxiliary force were like nothing. Not only were they ignored, but many people were also cursing and even laughing at them. Who would be willing to save such a group of ugly people? Therefore, as Noah said, even if the Third Kanto War was won, the people would still not look at the police in a different light, let alone praise them. In the end, what the police obtained was nothing more than an increase in the IP ranking and some compensation. In exchange for it with their lives. It's not impossible for you to use the fairy tale, as long as you give me a reason. In the end, Noah used such a sentence to sink the hearts of everyone present. And if the method you use to persuade me is to use the so-called profound righteousness, then please allow me to say something. Noah looked around at the people of the police auxiliary force and sneered. To hell with your righteousness. Oh, 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 oh. As soon as Noah's voice fell, the people of Fairy Tale collectively cheered. Coo. Almost all of the people of the police auxiliary force showed expressions of unwillingness and anger, but they were completely helpless. They could only look at Aldebaran sullenly, and for a moment, there was no sound. Noah. Rentaro clenched his fists tightly, and was struggling in his heart. Noah's words were equivalent to denying Rentaro, who also wanted to carry out the righteousness. However, Rentaro could not find a reason to refute. This was because, compared to the actions of the residents of the Tokyo area, the so-called righteousness was not convincing at all. President Yenju was at a loss. On one hand, she did not doubt Noah's words, but on the other hand, as kind as she was, she could not bear to see other people in pain, so she was also struggling. Aldebaran's partner, the initiator, named Morning Glow, seemed to respect Aldebaran very much. When she saw Aldebaran being denied, she also showed an angry expression, but she also understood that Noah was doing this for the sake of their cursed child, so she became the third person to struggle. Only my hall master Changzheng let out a melancholic sigh. President Noah, it seems that no matter what, you are not willing to do anything, right? Oh. Noah said sarcastically. In other words, as the leader of Aldebaran, you can't find a reason to convince me to do anything, right? You're right, I can't find a reason to convince you to do anything. The hall master admitted it openly, but his gaze toward Noah became sinister in a short moment. So, I can only create a reason myself. After saying that, without giving anyone time to react, the hall master stomped on the ground with his remaining leg and suddenly rushed to Noah's side. Kacha. After a light sound, a pitch-black tachi was placed on Noah's neck. President. Behind him, the members of Fairy Tale cried out in alarm and wanted to rush over. Stop! Aldebaran roared as he tightened his grip on the tachi on Noah's neck. If he comes one step closer, I will cut off his head. My cousin said with a calm expression. Aldebaran is only injured. After he recovers, he will make a comeback. It will take 3 days to complete the new monolith. During this time, if Aldebaran attacks again, we have no chance of winning. Guild leader Noah, we can only ask for your help. The number of policemen in Fairy Tale was even greater than the number of policemen in the auxiliary police force. What's more, among the policemen in Fairy Tale, there were also a lot of IP that were ranked at the top and had extraordinary strength. Coupled with the large number of cursed children, if Fairy Tale went out to fight, the possibility of stopping the Protogut animal army would increase by a lot. Noah also had the bullet that could kill Scorpio. If he used the bullet to kill Aldebaran, who was like the leader of the Protogut animal army, at that time, the Protogut animals that had lost Aldebaran's command would just be a sheet of loose sand, and the difficulty of dealing with them would greatly increase. Therefore, in order to repel the Protogut animal army, obtain the victory of the Third Kanto War, and protect the entire Tokyo area, my cousin did not hesitate to use this method. It was all because Fairy Tale's influence on the battle was too great, too great. My cousin had no other choice. Unfortunately, my cousin's choice could not be said to be wrong, but it could not be said to be right. The reason why it could not be said to be wrong was very simple. It was because this method was indeed the most efficient method. The reason why it could not be said to be right was even simpler. My cousin had misjudged the strength. I do not deny that although your method was not the most correct, it was the most efficient. Noah looked straight ahead, and his voice drilled into my cousin's ears. It's just that, you can't possibly think that you can take me down like this, right? Hearing this, my cousin's pupils suddenly constricted, and a sense of alarm suddenly rose in his heart. My cousin's expression changed, and without hesitation, he swung the sword on Noah's neck and placed it horizontally in front of his chest. Clang! In the next moment, a gorgeous sword light flashed out of the air without warning, and heavily fell on the sword that was placed horizontally in front of my cousin's chest. Clang! The sound of steel colliding with steel rang out. Humph! Our hall master Jing only felt an extremely frightening force suddenly hit his saber, and the vibration caused the web between his thumb and forefinger to rupture. His entire body seemed to have been hit by a mountain, and with a muffled groan, he was sent flying, and fiercely smashed into the ground not far away. Goo! The pain that was transmitted from his back caused his head to feel numb. It was a long while later before he woke up. With a flip of his body, he stood up with one knee on the ground. He raised his eyes and looked in Noah's direction. It was only at this moment that my cousin noticed. On the opposite side, in the hands of Noah, who was still being held hostage by my cousin just a second ago, an extremely dazzling knight's sword appeared out of nowhere. Oh! Holding the knight's sword, Noah glanced at my cousin who was kneeling on the ground not far away. As expected of the IP-ranked 275th police officer, to be able to dodge my sword, even if I didn't use my full strength, it is enough to prove that your skills are not bad. My cousin didn't reply, but his face was full of seriousness. He miscalculated. My cousin didn't consider that Noah also had outstanding fighting strength, and rashly made a move, leading the situation to the worst point. The people of the auxiliary police force finally reacted. Other than Rentaro and Yen Zhu who didn't know what to do, everyone else ran behind my cousin. Chao Xia even stood in front of my cousin and looked at Noah with vigilance. The people of Fairy Tale sneered as they stood behind Noah, and already pulled out their weapons. Xia Shi and Hina stood beside Noah with faces full of anger, as if to protect him from another sneak attack. I'm the hall leader. I believe you understand that although your method is the most efficient, it's also the most risky, right? Noah slowly sheathed the sword in his hand back into the scabbard in the side pouch and looked at Hall Master Chongjing. Because if you fail, it means that you have to start a war with me, Fairy Tale, with the already understaffed police auxiliary force. President Noah. My cousin's face finally showed signs of wavering and loudly roared. The auxiliary police force is used to fight against protozoa. Do you want the last hope of the Tokyo region to be buried in your own hands? People need to be responsible for their own words and actions. Noah turned his back. This sentence, I should have said it in front of everyone in the Tokyo region. As soon as Noah finished speaking, the people of Fairy Tale collectively raised their guns and pointed them at the auxiliary police force. The people of the auxiliary police force also immediately set up their guns and started firing. Seeing that a dispute was about to start because of different principles, someone finally stood up to stop it. Stop! Chapter 164. Between Fairy Tale and the auxiliary police force, a figure appeared. It was as if he was blocking the muzzles of both sides. Even though his face was dripping with sweat, he still opened his arms and stood between the two without any warning. Rentaro! Zhu exclaimed in shock. Noah. Rentaro stared at Noah's back as he walked past him. Stop it. Noah didn't reply. He maintained his posture with his back turned for a full 10 seconds before he sighed. In the end, you still decided to stand up. Ryutaro was left speechless. He took a deep breath and laughed bitterly. Our common enemy is the protozoa. Furthermore, Tokyo is facing a huge crisis right now. I can't let you kill each other. You have to understand, Rentaro. Noah turned around and faced Rentaro. Killing each other means harming one's own people. We're on the same side. Rentaro took a step forward and said agitatedly. We're all Tokyo police force, yet you're pointing your guns at each other. Isn't that killing each other? So, even though you might be shot to death, you still want to stand between us and stop us. Noah smiled. His smile was filled with emotion. This time, you can't deny that you're the type of person who will die young, right? Ah. That's right. That's how despicable you are. Rentaro said angrily. His eyes were still fixed on Noah. You said before that you won't forgive those who hurt your family and friends. However, these people didn't hurt your family or friends. I hope you won't do anything to them. Hearing this, Noah glanced at Rentaro, who was kneeling on one knee and being protected by the auxiliary police force. Rentaro looked at him with a serious expression on his face. Then, he turned his gaze to Rentaro. I'm not interested in playing this game of protecting the country with you in this kind of weather. Take them away. However, even after hearing Noah's words, Rentaro still stood there without moving. He stared at Noah without letting go. Everyone looked at each other in dismay when they saw Rentaro's reaction. What is he doing? Noah was also confused. However, after a while, when he saw the determination in Rentaro's eyes, he immediately understood what Rentaro was thinking. Rentaro. Noah furrowed his eyebrows. Do you want me to change my mind? Hearing this, everyone present understood what was going on. Rentaro was also trying to persuade Noah to bring Fairy Tail into the war. To be honest, when I found out from the TV that Fairy Tail was planted with bombs by the trash in the Tokyo area and became the object of their fear and panic, I also felt ashamed of being part of the same, plundered generation as them. Rentaro stared at Noah. Those bastards, on the one hand, mocked us in the dark, and even trampled on the cursed child. On the other hand, they hope that we will protect them. They are the most damned group of people in the world. I once thought of not participating in the war like you, but in the end, I still chose this path. Noah didn't say anything. Along with the rest of the people, he quietly listened to Rentaro's narration. Uphold justice, this is the phrase I heard the most after becoming a police officer. Rentaro lowered his open hand with a determined expression. Those trash in the Tokyo area no longer have justice, but it is precisely because of this that we need to uphold justice. We can't let justice disappear from this world. Otherwise, this world will only be left with despair. Rentaro. Beside him, Zhu couldn't help but call out softly. The group of police auxiliary troops led by the head of the police also lowered their heads, they seemed to be somewhat moved. As for the members of Fairy Tail, they all looked at each other and remained silent. Noah's eyes flickered, and finally, there was a trace of wavering in his heart. Since that day when Fairy Tail was planted with bombs and became the victims of others for no reason, Noah's disappointment in the humans of this world rose to the peak. Noah knew that this world was far from being as beautiful as the other worlds. The humans here had already exhausted all of their mental and physical strength just to survive, so much so that even the bad and ugly side of humanity had taken root and sprouted under the pressure, causing this world to be full of darkness. Therefore, at that time, Noah thought, was it really worth saving such a group of people? This answer, until now, Noah still couldn't come to a conclusion. However, the residents of the Tokyo area really did want to harm the children of fairy tale, and some people even took pleasure in it, making Noah unable to stop his anger. No matter what the final answer was, those who tried to harm fairy tale, hurt his family and companions, as the president of fairy tale, he absolutely couldn't let them go. Before this, Noah had always thought like this. Noah also never thought that what he did was wrong. If he couldn't even protect his family and companions, then how could he protect the entire region, the entire country, and even the entire world? What's more, Noah, who grew up in fairy tale in another world, understood the value of companions and family the most. Makarov also always took protecting the guild, his family, and his companions as his goal. And that also became the principle in Noah's heart. That was also the principle in the hearts of every fairy tale member. Whether it was this world's fairy tale or this world's fairy tale. Or was it the fairy tale from the other world? It was all the same. I don't want to cultivate justice at all. Noah raised his head and said word by word to Rintaro. I'm not that great, as long as I can protect my family, my companions, and my guild, that's enough. Then, for the sake of justice, I'll let you see my determination. Rintaro raised his fist and aimed it at Noah. Even if I have to drag you by force, I'll drag you to the battlefield. As soon as he finished speaking, Rintaro's straight right hand suddenly trembled. Kacha! Following the sound of something cracking, the skin on Ryutaru's right hand and right leg began to crack. They began to peel off like burning flames as they fell to the ground. Seeing this scene, everyone, including Noah, showed a shocked expression. Then, the true appearance of Rentaro's right hand and right foot was exposed to everyone's eyes. It was a prosthetic arm made of pitch-black metal. Rentaro's right hand and right foot had already been lost. Now, in place of his real right hand and right foot, the prosthetic arm that was attached to Rentaro's body was clearly a mechanical prosthetic arm made of pyrolite. Not only his right hand and right foot, but one of Rentaro's eyeballs also started to rotate, and like a switch, a geometrical image appeared within it. Even his eye was a specially made prosthetic eye. That posture was just like, how could this be? Hina was the first to speak in a daze. Mechanical soldier, Rintaro. Noah's eyes gradually focused. Let's introduce ourselves. Rintaro suddenly shouted as he raised his metal prosthetic hand. Former Ground Self-Defense Force Eastern Division 787th Mechanized Special Unit, New Human Creation Project Riken Rintaro. The New Human Creation Project's mechanical soldier. Just like Leech Kajian and Hina. Rintaro was also an existence that surpassed the realm of humans. Tendo Combat Technique Form 1/3 level. Rintaro suddenly got into a charging posture and pulled his metal prosthetic arm behind his back. Boom! Following the sound of an explosion, a golden eggshell bounced off Rentaro's prosthetic arm. Reindeer ambush. Taking advantage of the momentum generated by firing the cannon, Ryutaru dashed forward in Noah's direction. Chapter 165. Whoosh! In front of everyone present, Ryutaru's body turned into a blur under the powerful thrust. The prosthetic arm on his right hand seemed to have fused with his body, turning into a long spear. It pierced through the air and rushed towards Noah with a sharp sound. Hearing the sharp sound, Noah knew that the current Ryutaru was no longer the same as the usual Ryutaru. He directly stomped his foot, and his figure flashed, strangely disappearing from where he stood. Whoosh! Having suddenly lost his target, Ryutaru's expression changed slightly, and he quickly scanned his surroundings. The geometric pattern on his prosthetic eye immediately started to rotate and retract like a camera. The next moment, as if Ryutaru sensed something, he abruptly changed his direction. The metal prosthetic arm drew an arc in the air and blasted behind him. Clang! A loud clashing sound rang out, bringing with it some sparks that sputtered out in the field. Ryudaru's fist that was blasted behind him collided with a dazzling knight's sword that suddenly appeared behind him. Ugh! Noah was shocked when he felt the tremendous force coming from the knight's sword in his hand. It must be noted that Noah's body had not only been tempered for a long time, but it had also been strengthened countless times by the gastronomic virus. Even so, Noah felt some resistance from the force coming from Ryudaru's fist. It was easy to imagine how powerful Ryudaru's punch was. Little did he know that Ryudaru was even more shocked. The metal used in Ryudaru's prosthetic arm was not ordinary lutetium. It was another type of metal called super lutetium. It was a next-generation alloy with lutetium as the base and a mixture of rare and ordinary metals. It had a hardness and a melting point several times that of ordinary lutetium. Ryudaru's prosthetic arm was also equipped with 10 bullets for his wrist and 15 bullets for his feet. By using the thrust generated by firing these bullets, Ryudaru could obtain extraordinary attack power. It was a super attack power that could even destroy a stage 4 gastronomic virus in one hit. In the end, Noah blocked it with ease. Naturally, Noah did not know the shock in Ryudaru's heart. He withdrew the knight's sword in his hand and fiercely chopped down at Ryudaru with an oppressive force. Bang! Ryudaru, who finally reacted, hurriedly controlled the prosthetic leg on his right leg and fired the ammo cartridge. His body immediately used the thrust of the cartridge to glide past like a gliding fighter jet. At the same time, a thruster-like force erupted from his feet as he retreated rapidly. Clang! The knight's sword with a sharp sword light flashed past Ryudaru's original position and cut through the air. Noah's gaze and his body tensed up. And he shot out like an arrow and chased after Ryudaru. In the field, two figures suddenly flashed and appeared. Not long after, they met each other. Clang! The knight's sword clashed against the metal fist as Noah and Rentaro exchanged a fierce blow. Thump! 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 As the strong wind spread, Ryudaru took more than 5 steps back. On the other hand, Noah did not even take a single step back. Obviously, in terms of strength, even if Ryudaru unleashed the power of a mechanized soldier, Noah still had the upper hand. Noah's body turned into a black line and rushed toward Ryudaru. Every time his foot landed, it would leave a half-inch deep footprint on the ground. His powerful momentum was like that of a humanoid gastronomic virus, and it was extremely shocking. Seeing Noah rushing toward him with the momentum of a thunderbolt, Ryudaru finally understood that he had underestimated Noah. Tendo-style combat art form 2, 14th level. Ryudaru clenched his teeth and spun around. The spinning speed was so fast that it caused him pain. He stared at Noah, who was getting closer and closer, and let out a low roar. Hidden Zen. Xian Minghua. Ryudaru's right leg, which had turned into a black lightning bolt, lashed out like a whip and fired the cartridge again. Huff! 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 Every time Ryudaru kicked out, a shadow of a leg would appear in front of him. In just an instant, the shadow of a metallic leg shrouded the space in front of Ryudaru. At that moment, Noah, who was sprinting, appeared in the space filled with leg shadows in the blink of an eye. Ha! The shadow of a leg stopped in midair. Under the push of the cartridge, each shadow of a leg had enough power to penetrate a steel wall. With Ryudaru's roar, the shadow of a leg fell on Noah like raindrops or a storm. Within his dark pupils, a pitch-black shadow of a leg was flashing. A strong gust of wind was also rushing towards Noah's face. However, Noah didn't flinch at all. Instead, he raised his knight's sword and fiercely slashed forward. The path of the knight's sword was very ordinary. There wasn't the slightest bit of fancy in it. It was just a normal slash, but it carried an unparalleled momentum that could split mountains and split the air. It even left a mark in the air, and a strong wind gathered at the edge of the sword. Clink, 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 clink. Suddenly, the shadow of a leg collided with the sharp knight's sword, and the sound of metal clashing could be heard. The shadow of a leg that collided with the knight's sword seemed to be scattered and disappeared in the air. The shadow of the leg also disappeared rapidly. Tendo-style combat art form 15th level. In the end, Ryudaru finally gave up on this flashy attack. He withdrew his leg, clenched his fist, and twisted his body to face Noah. Bang! As the cartridge on his leg was fired, Ryudaru shot toward Noah like a cannonball. Yunling Bihu Karp. A fist made of black metal tore through the air with lightning speed. A sharp wind gathered at the tip of the fist, and it directly fell on Noah's head. The black fist enlarged rapidly in Noah's eyes, causing him to narrow his eyes slightly. The knight's sword in his hand was withdrawn in an extremely nimble manner. Like a shield, he stood in front of Noah. The pitch-black fist landed squarely on the body of the knight's sword. Clang! In the loud sound of the collision, Ryudaru's fist suddenly exploded with a tyrannical force, and it continuously acted on the knight's sword. Hiya! Ryudaru's angry roar spread far and wide in the air, and the force in his hand continued to burst forth. Bang! 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 Perhaps Ryudaru knew that his fist alone could not pose a threat to Noah, so he controlled his metal prosthesis like a madman and fired 5 cartridges in succession. Every time he fired a cartridge, the power of his fist would increase by an entire level. Bang! Noah could clearly feel the force exerted on the knight's sword getting stronger and stronger. In the end, it was so strong that even Noah felt some pressure. Hiya! Ryudaru roared with all his might, and the veins on his forehead were already bulging. He crazily vented his strength, and he heavily pushed his fist away from Noah's knight's sword. Bang! The force of the impact spread out, and even the air became turbulent. Under the tremendous force, Noah's feet rubbed against the ground, and he slid back 2 to 3 meters before he could stop himself. Bang! Immediately after, the sound of the cartridge being fired echoed again. Ryudaru's roar sounded behind this sound. Tendo-style combat technique, Form 2, Level 11. Ryudaru's feet were almost above his head, and his body spun up and down like a top. The thrusters on his legs also burst forth with a strong light, and like a whirlwind, he approached Noah. Hidden Zen. Wei Ting. With a heavy kick, he viciously kicked the knight's sword in Noah's hand. Bang! A huge sound reverberated like an explosion, and a shockwave visible to the naked eye spread out like ripples. With Noah's feet as the center, cracks continuously spread out on the hard ground, forming cracks. Chapter 166. Bang! Under everyone's watchful eyes, the ground in front of the 2 combatants began to crack inch by inch with a muffled sound. Like a spider web, cracks began to spread across the ground. The shock waves from the impact spread outwards, causing the ground to crack inch by inch and send gravel flying in all directions. Many of the spectators felt a stinging pain on their cheeks. Some of the gravel even left deep cuts on their faces, causing them to bleed profusely. Step back! The preceptor hurriedly shouted. The entire auxiliary police force, who had lost their heads out of fear, immediately retreated and looked towards the center of the battlefield with fearful expressions. We'll step back as well. On the other hand, Xia Shi was the one who made the decision for the fairy tale side. Under his command, everyone retreated a certain distance away from the gravel that was flying towards them like bullets. Everyone's eyes were glued to the scene before them. Their eyes were filled with shock at Ryudaru's new identity and power, as well as shock at Noah's ability to hold his own against Ryutaru without falling into a disadvantageous position. Bang! Then, with another muffled sound, two figures flew out from the center of the battlefield where the shock waves were spreading outwards. They scraped against the ground, creating two long trenches. It was not until they were more than 10 meters away from each other that they steadied themselves and looked at each other. Upon closer inspection, the expressions of Noah and Rintaro, who were standing opposite each other from a distance, were also different. Rintaro was tightly gripping his pitch-black metal prosthetic arm. The prosthetic leg on his right foot was also tightly fastened to the ground. His prosthetic eye, which had a geometric pattern on it, was staring at the figure opposite him. His chest was heaving up and down, and his face was slightly pale. It seemed that he had expended a lot of energy. Noah, on the other hand, was still holding the dazzling knight's sword. He wasn't panting, and his expression was still as steady as before. Other than his clothes being slightly dirted, he didn't show any other signs of abnormality. At this point, it was obvious who was giving their all in this battle, and who was still at ease. Noah looked at Ryutaru, who was panting heavily, and a heartfelt smile finally appeared on his face. "You're quite capable, aren't you? So that's how it is, Rintaro. So this is the power you've been hiding all this time. Ever since I met you, I felt that you weren't simple at all. You've really hidden it well. I'll return the same to you." Ryutaro calmed his breathing and looked at Noah with a serious expression. "I didn't expect that even after releasing my powers, I still wouldn't be able to defeat you. It's no wonder you have the ability to train an initiator at Yenju's level. You've hidden your abilities well. It's a pity." Noah smiled calmly at first, then slowly withdrew his smile. "If that's all you've got, I'd like to see how you're going to drag me onto the battlefield." After saying that, Noah swung his hand that was holding the sword. While drawing an arc of light, he slowly sheathed his sword back into the scabbard that he had been holding tightly in his left hand all this while. He then lifted the cloth bag that contained the scabbard and put away the knight's sword that had been sheathed back into the scabbard. Seeing Noah put away his weapon, not only the spectators, but even Ryutaro couldn't help but be stunned. "What's the meaning of this?" Noah didn't answer. Instead, he tossed the side pouch in the direction of Fairy Tale, and it was caught by Tina. This time, Ryutaro understood. Noah was planning to fight him barehanded. In that instant, Ryutaro couldn't help but feel a little angry at being looked down upon. Although Rintaro was also fighting barehanded, his right hand and right leg, which were made by chakra, were much tougher than normal weapons. Strictly speaking, they weren't even considered hands. In addition, if Rintaro were to fire the ammo cartridge hidden in his prosthetic limb, his attack power would increase by several folds. Since he could even penetrate a stage 4 protozoan in one hit, it would be a dead end if he were to face it with a pure human body. At that moment, Ryutaro revealed a somewhat stubborn smile. "I won't go easy on you." Hearing this, Noah still didn't say a word. He only extended his hand and waved at Ryutaro. Ryutaro's mind heated up, and he crouched down. Then, like a spring that had been released, he violently charged at Noah. He didn't hold back at all, and his heavy fist heavily smashed into Noah's chest. Noah's body immediately trembled, and his body appeared a dozen meters away amidst the faint sound of something breaking through the air. However, an extremely blurry afterimage remained where he was. Bang! Ryutaro's fist heavily penetrated Noah's afterimage and scattered it. Immediately after, the sound of something breaking through the air was heard again. Noah's figure suddenly appeared beside Ryutaro like a ghost. His fist, which was covered in pitch-black rainwater, carried a sharp gust of wind and a fierce force as it mercilessly smashed into Ryutaro's head. At this moment, Noah's terrifying speed caused Ryutaro's pupils to shrink, and his prosthetic eye began to spin wildly. The prosthetic eye that was inserted into Ryutaro's left eye was a high-performance computer wrapped in a graphite transistor specification nanocore processor with a superalloy shell. In addition to various sensors, the prosthetic eye was also equipped with a multiplication function that could increase the brain's thinking speed by thousands of times. Therefore, in Ryutaro's eyes, the flow of time was extremely slow. Even the movements of the cursed child were similar to slow motion in Ryutaro's eyes. It was precisely under such circumstances that Ryutaro was able to keep up with Noah's speed, agility, and movements that far exceeded that of a human. He also relied on his extremely high attack power to contend with Noah. However, now, Noah's speed was so much faster than before that Ryutaro, who had a special prosthetic eye, almost couldn't react in time. Almost like a conditioned reflex, Ryutaro tilted his numb head back. The fist, which carried a sharp gust of wind, immediately swung past Ryutaro's face, causing him to feel a burning pain on his face. Unfortunately, before Ryutaro could rejoice, Noah, who had flashed to his side, suddenly twisted his elbow and smashed it down. A sharp gust of wind formed at the tip of his elbow, and the ear-piercing sound caused Ryutaro's eardrums to sting. Ryutaro's expression changed. He hurriedly clenched his fist and threw an uppercut with his metal prosthetic arm, which heavily collided with Noah's elbow. Bang! As the ripples of the force spread out, the faint sound of bones rubbing against each other could be heard. When the metal fist made of super alloy collided with Noah's elbow, Ryutaro, who thought that Noah's arm, which was made of ordinary flesh and blood, should have been fractured, felt the powerful force contained in the fist in the next second. His face turned slightly pale, and under the powerful force, his body was directly smashed to the ground. Bang! With Ryutaro's body as the center, cracks spread out from where he landed. Humph! Ryutaro immediately let out a muffled groan. An unbearable pain came from his back, which was smashed to the ground, causing Ryutaro's mind to go blank for a moment. Whoosh! At this time, Noah did not stop for a moment. He bent his toes slightly and kicked Ryutaro's head, who was lying on the ground. From the looks of it, if Ryutaro was kicked, he would probably pass out on the spot. The strong wind that came straight at his head made Ryutaro's brain work in time. With a whoosh sound, cold sweat broke out all over his body. Ryutaro had no time to think about how embarrassed he was, nor did he have time to think about how Noah was able to knock him, who had a super alloy prosthetic arm, to the ground in a head-on collision. Instead, he rolled on the ground and dodged Noah's dangerous kick. Before Ryutaro could get up, the familiar sound of something breaking through the air was heard. Then, Noah, who was like a ghost, appeared in front of Ryutaro again. His speed was even more terrifying than before. Hi-ya! After realizing that he could not shake off Noah, Ryutaro's body suddenly tensed up. He shouted loudly, clenched his fist, and swung it at Noah, who appeared in front of him. Bang! A cartridge was fired, and the empty golden cartridge was thrown high into the air. You're tuning into the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.